Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Brady. I am here with Marissa Mayer, who is, of course, former CEO of Yahoo. Marissa, you were an early employee of Google. Now you are an entrepreneur, co-founder, and CEO of Sunshine. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I admire the gnome in the background. We'll get to that later. But I want to start with, you followed the Zeitgeist in Silicon Valley your whole career. Talk about the moment that we're in right now. And we're, on the one hand, seeing layoffs. On the other hand, there's so much excitement around AI and the potential. What are you feeling right now?
I think it is a bit of a balance. I think that obviously this economic moment, the big tech layoffs are definitely a challenging moment. But I, for one, I've spent a lot of time being really interested in AI and trying to think about the impact it will have, how to weave it into business. Both my degrees at Stanford were in artificial intelligence way back in the day. And so for me, I've been really excited that there's a moment here where it feels very tangible. I think what ChatGPT has brought to the conversation is early, but just shows so much promise and really has ignited people's imagination for what this technology could do in terms of everyday tasks and everyday life. And I think it's a moment of real optimism, particularly in the long term.
It's interesting because the big tech, and by that, Google, Microsoft, invested so much in AI, but yet ChatGPT, much like what you're doing now, really was a startup. It's now certainly got a big investment from Microsoft. Is that to be expected? I mean, talk about the entrepreneurial energy, because we've been so fixated on the big players to this point.
Well, I think there's a lot of different pieces at play. But when I think about what causes disruption in technology, a lot of time that comes down to focus. Certainly you need investment, you need a lot of data. And from that aspect, big tech is advantaged. But when you're small and you can make decisions and make really, quick responses and changes to what it is you're developing and feedback that you're getting both from employees and early users and adopters, I think it's something that can really aid with disruption. And that's why, you start to see sometimes disruption come from surprising places. And I think everyone always loves that sort of David and Goliath story where there's someone really small who does something surprising to catch the attention of the giants.
And you're now David, a female version of David. And so what was it when you left Yahoo? You must have contemplated a lot of different options. What made you decide to go in this direction?
Well, for my whole career, I've worked with and really benefited from and been challenged by entrepreneurs. Whether it was, working for Larry and Sergey and Vilo and implicitly Yang when I was at Yahoo, for all the different companies that I've acquired. And I just think that the mark that they make on the world and the way that they, inspire people and really try and make change for the better is something that I was really excited by. And I was privileged at both companies to be able to start initiatives inside the larger companies that sometimes looked like a startup, but I realized I had never done the actual startup thing. And so I was really excited with the idea of trying something entrepreneurial. But obviously there's a lot that goes into that. You need to have the right idea. You have to have the right moment. You have to have the right partner. And I felt like in the last few years, that really came into focus. I've got a great co-founder here at Sunshine in Enrique Munoz Torres. We've worked together now for more than 15 years or more years than I'd like to admit. And we're both really passionate about everyday tasks, some of the minutia that gets in the way, and how to make technology smarter in terms of giving people time back.
So talk a bit about the business model for Sunshine, even how it's evolved from the initial idea to where you are today.
Sure. Well, when we started, we were a stealth startup, and we knew that we were very excited about events, groups, small scale sharing, family sharing, calendaring, contact management. They kind of all hung together. And when we started doing initial sketches of areas where we were excited, what we might do to try and differentiate ourselves in those spaces, we realized that all roads led to contacts. So, when you're trying to help someone, get a task done, be it organizing a group or an event or communicating with family, you have to have the contacts right. If you don't send those invitations or that information to the right place, it doesn't matter. And contacts is a surprisingly hard and unsolved problem that's there in plain sight. We all have contacts. Pretty much everyone's contacts are a mess. And we felt that if we could really get that piece right, it would be a terrific foundation for us and for others to really build more fulfilling apps on top of it.
Can you talk
about... Our first app is in the App Store now. It's Sunshine Smart Contacts. And we are really happy with it. It focuses on organizing your contacts, deduplicating them, keeping them up to date, and really seamlessly bringing them together from a lot of different sources. Your phone, your email, LinkedIn, etc. So we're excited to be working on that, and then we'll turn our attention to other related areas.
Now, are you using, whether it's Chat GPT or any sort of generative AI? It seems like an obvious use case for that.
We aren't using generative AI right now. We do have some classifiers that work to try and understand data, whether it's correct, whether it matches up with a particular person, and also the merging task of contacts, of trying to understand if two people are distinct or if they're the same. It requires a deceptive level of intelligence and data to really make sure that you make a good judgment on that. And so we're deploying different, machine learned models in those capacities.
So you must have a lot of people come up to you to ask for career advice and such. You were such a prominent name in Silicon Valley. Marissa, I'm curious to get your perspective on that because, when you go from being on the cover of so many different magazines, CEO of Yahoo and so much profile, to being a startup founder, and I know that the company's much bigger now than just simply a startup. When you look back on those days, is there any sort of lessons that you've gleaned from that? Because I know a lot of us would not want to constantly be in the spotlight like that, advantages and disadvantages, but how do you look back on your time at Yahoo from that perspective?
I think that, for me, I really am very focused on impact. I think that, I was so privileged to work at Google and Yahoo. These are companies that just weren't just successful, but really changed the way people thought, what they did each day, had a real impact on people's lives, and I would argue very much for the better. And so for me, I've always been very focused with impact. And unfortunately, or fortunately, with impact comes attention. There's scrutiny on what you do. There's interest in what you're going to do. And so in terms of the spotlight, I think, I didn't really seek it. I do think those companies were worthy of it, and have benefited from it, obviously. But, for me, it's really about getting Sunshine focused on how do we have a really positive impact for the largest scale of number of users and people.
Have you found, in terms of the talent that you've been seeking, I certainly talk to a lot of CIOs and people in the Valley who, are looking for diverse talent. They want more women in leadership. They simply want more tech talent, period. What's been your experience?
I think that, overall, it's a great moment for talent. You asked me a moment ago about career advice. And for me, I always tell people to look for companies and problems where there's a lot more to be done than there are currently people working on it. When you start to see some of the layoffs that we've seen at bigger companies, what that's essentially them saying is, we have more people than we have work. In a startup, that's implicitly in the reverse. And in high growth companies, what you see is, there's just a lot more work than you have people to get it done. And that's really where there's a lot of opportunity for fast growth. And also for your career, there's a lot of opportunity to learn, just because you're going to be, asked to do a lot more and have a bigger impact than you would elsewhere.
So let's talk about Sunshine. And just from the word go, you would have access to a lot of different VC offices that would be investing in you as a person. How did you think about funding to start with? Because that's one of the initial challenges that founders face when you think about how you structure your board, how you structured the money. What was your strategy there?
Well, here at Sunshine, we're still very much a startup and we're very much in seed. So we're, somewhere between 20 and 30 people at any given moment. And we, in the beginning, we did self-funding. We were lucky to be able to have that as an opportunity. And we've done a single seed funding round, mostly comprised of angels. We do have a few VC firms that have invested, but sometime in the next year or two, we'll be looking at a Series A. And we wanted to make sure we had a strong technical foundation, a strong team, and really had good product market fit with some of our initial products before we started to look at that, more formal venture capital fundraising route.
And contacts is something that most of us associate with being part of, whether it's, let's take Outlook or Google or such. As a standalone offering, what's the value proposition that you think is resonating in the market? What is it that's going to make somebody want to download a new app to their phone?
Well, the interesting thing that we think is true about Sunshine is we don't necessarily want more of your screen time. This isn't necessarily a foreground app. We don't think people are going to be constantly managing their contacts all the time. But what we do think is everyone's contacts are a mess. You have some people on your email that you don't have on your phone. There's a bunch of people on your phone where the contacts are stale. There's a bunch of duplicates for most people on their phone. There's a bunch of misspellings because you quickly typed in someone's name and didn't know how to spell it. We see companies as last names, all of these types of issues. But what we've seen is if you can really help stitch all that together and get it well organized for people, everything on your phone works better. Right? When you go to call them, you reach the right person, the phone number works. When you go to email them, when you go to connect with them on WhatsApp or LinkedIn or Twitter or follow them, you've actually got the right information, you're finding the right people. And it's really quite comprehensive. And so our focus has been really on trying to pull all those pieces of information together and doing it in a way that really equips people to handle those contacts and relationships better. So we do things like, for example, if you give us permission to integrate with your Gmail account, you can actually see the last email exchange you had with that person. Which is sometimes a really nice way when you're starting a conversation with them or reaching out to them to be like, wait, I know that we did this together last month, or I saw your note about that from last week. Those types of things are really nice to include. And we now have a feature that does sync. So it actually takes the contacts, the improved contacts. We basically scour the web, try and find additional information on people associated with cards. And we can now take those enhanced contacts and put them back into your iOS book, where they can benefit all the apps on your phone. Anything that accesses contacts or needs contacts can benefit from those better organized, not stale contacts.
So you've been CEO of a large company, which brings with it infrastructure and many different teams of support. Now being a leader of a relatively small company, talk about how you lead differently in that environment. And I'm sure you were offered CEO roles, why you chose to go this route instead.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, for me, I was just really excited at the idea of an entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah.
Getting to envision a product and really build something from the ground up. It's not easy, but I was really inspired by it. And there are some things that are very different at a small scale than at a large scale. But I think that what I gleaned from my time at Google and Yahoo, among many things, is how do you motivate teams to work on really hard problems that can have a big impact, especially over the long term. So the fruits may not be immediate, but we think it's a big and worthwhile problem to work on. And while we've started with contacts, our real goal is around relationships, understanding relationships. How do you know this person? What will you share with them? What do you have in common? How can we facilitate all of that and help you manage those relationships more easily? For a lot of it, it's mundane tasks, right? Keeping your contacts up to date is kind of mind-numbing, which is why no one does it by hand. But computers are quite good at it. And so that's really ultimately what we've focused on. It's a hard problem, but if you get it right, it can have a really big impact for people.
Well, it sounds...
I think that's really what motivates teams, whether the companies are big or small.
It sounds like a technical challenge. It also sounds like a psychological challenge in terms of even getting the trust of people to give up that information. Are there any particular innovative hires that you've done that you think are also helping to distinguish Sunshine from others out there that are attempting to do the same thing?
We've hired a great team, so I think that that's overall a real strength of the company. But things that we've done, I think, are largely, at least in terms of gaining people's trust, are really in terms of what we've done for features, as well as really regarding our users' privacy. So we don't just have a privacy policy, we have a privacy pledge that talks about what we will and won't do with data. And we really feel that if you bring a piece of information to the system, it's your information. We should not share that with someone without your explicit permission or their explicit or the actual contact holder's explicit permission. And so you have to handle data really carefully and thoughtfully. But I think that we've come up with some really nice features. One of my favorites is when you update your information. So for me, for example, because I was often on call and, into the type of position where people might need to reach me, I gave my phone number and my email address out very freely at both Google and Yahoo. And today I shudder to think at the many hundreds or thousands of people who think they have a valid contact card for me where something on it, or maybe the whole thing, is now stale. And I didn't necessarily mean to fall out of contact with those people, but our system has it so if I actually update my email address, my phone number, those people all get the information. But because you have to be concerned about privacy, we actually put it on a 1-day delay. So you change your information, you can actually see who else on Sunshine has that information, who's going to get it. So if there is anyone that you don't want to get the new piece of information, you can actually uncheck the box. And the nice thing is your contact card will stay up to date on all the people's cards where you want it to be, and not on those where you don't. And so it gives a lot of user control, as well as solving the problem of out-of-date contacts.
It would sound to me like a large company would want to buy you and integrate you into their own service. Is that something that would be of interest to you, or is it too early?
I think it's too early. I think that we think there's a lot of potential in basically building a suite or a portfolio of products that helps people with these kind of day-to-day relationship management. We're starting with contacts, but we have a lot of ideas around how to help groups, how to help people organizing events, big and small, how to help people communicating in small circles, those types of things. And so we really want to explore some of those pieces. And we're really trying to build a company for the long haul, which is, of course, the hardest of all. I've always loved and been fascinated with design. And, a company is the hardest of design problems because you need to build a team and a culture. You need to build a product that appeals to people, and you need to build a business model that works. And we're midstream on all of those things. And it's a really exciting and challenging moment.
Well, and I've heard many people say the next big company is just an ecosystem. It could be very small at the center and through partnerships and such be huge. I want to end with the Zeitgeist, which is, you mentioned privacy. That is a concern that is much more heightened now than when, for example, you were at Google. Talk about how you think public attitudes have shifted from where you sit, even with regard to, big tech itself. Have you noticed a significant change that you're tapping into here?
I think so, but I also think there are some things that are mainstays overall. People are willing to give information if they feel comfort with the steward of that information. What is that person I'm giving the information to going to do with it? And also, what do I get from it, right? People want to see a benefit, either a collective benefit or a unique individual benefit from that information. And that's why we have to have such firm privacy guardrails around the data that we're helping people with here at Sunshine. And we have to regard whether information was privately brought in from a user or whether it was something that was publicly gleaned from a data source or from the web. And we have to have really solid controls on that piece, because that's how you really respect. That's being a good steward of the data. And then it really comes down to how can we make people's contacts profoundly better? And how can we help build systems on top of that that can really help their everyday lives. And that's the value add part that we think helps tip the scale towards sharing some of this information that people may be sensitive or protective about.
Marissa, I also want to ask, I was raised in an environment where you put your all into work. I know that you were too, famously hard worker, took very short maternity leaves. It seems like the next generation that is coming up has a different attitude. And I would perhaps point to the pandemic as well as having shifted attitudes. What are you seeing and how are you thinking about things like work-life balance and the value proposition that you give to employees now coming into this company and just in general what you see in business?
Yes, I think it's the age-old struggle. I think that one of the things we saw in the early days of Google is home and work was much more integrated. Right? You were like,
Google did your laundry for you.
Laundry at work. Sometimes you would get your packages at work. During the pandemic, that obviously all flipped to being in the home. And being very integrated there. And I think that for people, you really need to figure out how is it that you work best? Do you work best in that kind of really solidly integrated environment? And I know for some people, I find it particularly helpful having an office, having a place of work is just a really good time management tool. When I'm at the office, I'm all in on work. And when I'm at home, I can be all in on home and family.
So you're in your office right now.
This is my office, yeah. And actually, it's a little bit of Silicon Valley history because it turns out it's also the first Facebook office.
Oh, really? And interesting.
Yes. So we actually have been, I think we might be the one company that's not by design, but just by happenstance. We were in the first Google office when we started, and then we had a sublease, and now we are over in the first Facebook office. So we're in two of the giants' first offices. But yeah, we're in the office now.
Anything else you'd want to say just about the business landscape right now? Because we are in a relatively tough economy. What are you seeing in terms of, I know you're talking direct to consumer, but any thoughts in terms of the headwinds that you're facing or the challenges? Not sure what keeps you up at night.
Well, what I would say is, there are people who are smarter than me, especially venture capitalists who've seen these types of periods. And it is a period of real economic tightening, obviously, and a lot of economic change. But I think the optimistic point of view is that we've had these periods in the past, and they've given rise to great companies. Sometimes because of that pressure and because of that constraint, companies get built even more for the long term. And in terms of our specific business, I think that, when we start to think about relationships, there's personal relationships and there's professional relationships. And for people who are looking for their next opportunities, one of the best things they can do is get their network in order and really think through how can you make the most out of the connections and the relationships that you have in terms of finding that next opportunity. Who do you want to start a company with? Who do you want to approach for your next role? Those types of things. So I think that on both the macro level across the economy, it's a great moment for an opportunity to build companies that have real meaning, impact, and standing power and staying power. And I think in the particular case of Sunshine, I think we're well positioned for this moment in terms of the value that we bring to people.
And is it harder to build relationships in a remote work environment?
Oh, I think for sure. I think that we're all seeing that now in terms of how deep the relationships are and just how quickly and easily you interact with someone, how quickly that relationship really builds. I think it is harder. I think it's still possible in a remote environment, but I think it is harder. And, there is something special about in person. You don't have to always be in person. But I know we recently did a small offsite, and we have some new college grads here who just never experienced anything like that, and it really brought another layer and element of personality and just a personal approach overall to work, which was refreshing, I think, for everyone. So
you have the app that's now in the App Store. What's next? And remind us again what the app is so people can download.
Sure. The app is Sunshine Smart Contacts. We also have an app for people who are very excited about birthdays. It was a side project that we built called Sunshine Birthdays. And we're going to continue to try and make contacts great. And we're also going to be building new features that start to branch out to help people with groups and events. And I think right now we are exclusively on iOS in the App Store, but soon we'll be coming to other platforms.
And the business model, people don't pay for this, so the business model is really about the data?
It is a freemium model. So when you first download our app, it's free, but we have different features that you can pay for, like sync to your iOS, as well as we also have a new feature that we'll be launching soon that allows you to update your contacts with users both on Sunshine and off of Sunshine. And you can do that for a small fee.
Great.
But it's a direct-to-consumer payment model.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Marissa.